Usually when we talk about a book, we imagine something tangible.
Right, something's physical.
Exactly, like something you can physically pull off a wooden shelf. You drag your thumb across the pages, check the index for a reference, or I don't know, maybe even smell the ink in the aging paper.
Yeah, a book is an object you can verify.
Right, you can hand it to a friend, you can point to a specific paragraph, and you can actually debate the author's exact phrasing because the physical text is sitting right there on the table between you.
It possesses a physical presence that, well, it anchors it in reality. I mean, we base our entire understanding of history, law, and literature on the assumption that a text is something we can observe, something we can authenticate and cross-reference.
But then you encounter a historical mystery that completely shatters that baseline expectation.
Oh, absolutely shatters it.
I mean, imagine a text roughly 3 times the size of the Quran. A book that is said to contain the names of every future ruler, every king, and every oppressor until the end of time.
It's an incredible claim.
It really is. A document dictated directly by the Archangel Gabriel and written down by the hand of Ali ibn Abi Talib.
Yeah.
Yet, half the Muslim world does not believe it even exists.
Which is fascinating when you think about the scale of it.
Totally. So we're talking about the Sahifa Fatimah, also known in the historical sources as the Musha Fatimah. And today, we are pulling apart a massive stack of sources to understand how an invisible book shaped, well, 1,400 years of history.
Yeah, we are looking at a really remarkable cross-section of literature today. I mean, we are spanning centuries of intense debate here.
It's a lot of material.
It is. We're examining this one specific text, or, the idea of this text, through the lenses of theology, history, polemics, and even modern sociology.
So what exactly is on the table for us today?
Well, we have comprehensive academic papers by Dr. Mohammed Al-Mufti, which meticulously dissect the textual traditions. We're analyzing classical Shia texts like Al-Kafi by Sheikh al-Kuli.
Right, a foundational text.
Exactly. And the monumental encyclopedia Bihar al-Anwar by Allama Majlisi. And we are placing those right alongside fierce Sunni theological critiques from major historical heavyweights, people like Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn Kathir.
Which gives us that heavy theological contrast.
Exactly. And on top of all that, we are layering in modern, secular historical evaluations from Western academics, scholars like Wilfred Madelung and Patricia Cron.
Okay, so before we go a single step further, I need to state something very clearly for you listening. Because this topic touches directly on the historical and theological split between Sunni and Shia Islam, a split that has defined much of the geopolitical and religious landscape of the Middle East for over a millennium, we are remaining completely impartial.
Completely neutral.
Right. We are not taking sides here. We are not endorsing any specific theological doctrine, nor are we supporting any political viewpoint.
That's a crucial point.
Yeah, our mission today is strictly educational. We are simply going to convey the ideas, the intense debates, and the incredibly complex history contained in the original source material. We are here to understand the landscape, not to declare a winner.
That baseline of impartiality is vital for this kind of analysis. The goal here is comprehension.
Right, we just want to understand the mechanics of it.
Exactly. We want to understand how a single document functions within entirely different epistemological frameworks. I mean, how does it build authority for one group? How does it threaten the theological boundaries of another?
And why does it serve as a mechanism for processing trauma, right?
Yes, exactly. By remaining neutral observers, we can actually appreciate the profound mechanics of how religious narratives construct reality.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because what is so captivating is how this single unseen book acts as a mirror.
A historical mirror.
Yeah. Depending on which angle you view it from, it reflects the entirety of Islamic history, politics, and theology.
It really does.
To really grasp the weight of the Sahifa Fatimah, we have to transport ourselves back to a very specific, very volatile moment in time.
Right back to the beginning.
The setting is Medina. The year is 632 CE, or 11 AH in the Islamic calendar. The Prophet Muhammad has just passed away.
And the socio-political environment in Medina at that exact moment, it just cannot be overstated.
It was chaos, right?
The community is entirely unmoored. I mean, for over 2 decades, the Prophet was not just their spiritual guide. He was the head of state, the supreme judge, the military commander, and the direct conduit to the divine.
He was everything.
Literally the center of their universe.
Yeah.
So when he takes his final breath, this unimaginable vacuum opens up. And almost immediately, there's an incredibly tense political crisis regarding succession.
Right, the gathering at Sahifa.
Exactly. This culminates in the events at Sahifa, where a group of prominent companions gather, and Abu Bakr is chosen as the first caliph. All of this happens while Ali ibn Abi Talib and the Prophet's immediate family are occupied with preparing his body for burial.
Let's pause on that shifting power dynamic, because understanding that sudden displacement is key to understanding the origins of the Sahifa.
It's the catalyst for the entire narrative.
Exactly. The historical records, both Sunni and Shia, agree that right in the middle of this seismic shift, the focus hones in on one person, the Prophet's daughter, Fatimah al-Zahra.
And she is devastated.
Completely. She was the Prophet's last surviving child. Her brothers and sisters had all passed away during his lifetime, and our sources note that she lived only a very short time after his passing.
The accounts vary quite a bit on the exact timeline.
Yeah, suggesting she lived anywhere from 75 days to 95 days, or maybe up to 6 months.
It is a remarkably brief and tragic window of time. The depth of her grief is a central theme in all the biographical literature across all sects.
It wasn't just losing a father.
No, not at all. It was the loss of the Prophet of God, the literal axis of their entire spiritual and communal world. The divine connection that had guided their lives through revelation had suddenly ceased.
And that profound, overwhelming emotional trauma is instantly compounded by severe political disenfranchisement.
Yes, the political reality hits immediately.
Right, and this brings us to the dispute over Fadak. And I want to be clear, this wasn't just a minor disagreement over a small patch of dirt.
Not at all. Fadak was extremely valuable.
Exactly. Fadak was a highly lucrative agricultural oasis that the Prophet had acquired. The income from Fadak supported his family and funded his charitable activities.
It was their economic foundation.
Yeah, so when he died, Fatima claimed it as her rightful inheritance. But the new caliphate under Abu Bakr confiscated it.
Based on a specific theological argument.
Right, citing a hadith that prophets do not leave inheritance and that their property belongs to the state as charity. Stripping her of Fadak was a devastating maneuver that removed her material independence.
It left her completely isolated.
So within days of her father's death, she is experiencing a totalizing loss, personal, spiritual, and material.
She finds herself suddenly marginalized in the very community her father built. I mean, the political center of gravity has shifted completely away from her household.
It's a heartbreaking scenario.
It really is. And it is exactly in this crucible of intense grief and socio-political isolation that the narrative of the Sahifa Fatimah begins.
So how do the sources describe what happens next?
According to the foundational Shia narratives, the ones found in texts like Al-Kafi Fatimah, is in a state of absolute, inconsolable sorrow. To comfort her, the archangel Gabriel, descends to visit her.
Mashallah, given her elevated status in Islamic theology as the leader of the women of paradise, she is deemed worthy of receiving this direct divine communication.
It's a profound theological statement.
It is. The idea that an angel would cross the boundary of the unseen just to comfort a grieving daughter is incredibly powerful.
And the classical sources are very specific about the nature of this visitation. They use the term tasliya.
Tasliya. What does that specifically imply?
It translates roughly to consolation or bringing comfort. The texts are explicit that the angel isn't coming to deliver a new religion or to abrogate the Quran.
Okay, so it's not a new scripture in that sense.
Not at all. The angel is coming specifically to console her. Jibril speaks to her about her father's exalted status in the afterlife, reassuring her of his peace. But then, the communication expands.
It goes beyond just reassurance.
Exactly. The angel begins to gently reveal what will happen to her descendants in the future.
And here's the mechanical detail of how the book actually comes into existence. As Gabriel speaks to her, her husband, Ali ibn Abi Talib, is sitting beside her.
Right.
She dictates what the angel says, or she repeats the angelic communication, and Ali acts as the scribe. He writes every single word down.
He is the physical author of the text, but she is the recipient of the knowledge.
Exactly. This compiled physical document becomes the Sahifa Fatimah. Now, the sources get very specific about the physical dimensions of this text. It's described as a scroll or a bound book.
Yes, the physical descriptions are quite vivid.
And one of the most famous, most quoted descriptions comes from the 6th Shia Imam, Jafar al-Sadiq. He states that it is 3 times the size of your Quran.
Which is an astonishing physical claim when you break down the math.
Let's do the math on that.
Well, if we estimate the Arabic text of the Quran at roughly 77,000 words, we are talking about a dictated document of well over 230,000 words.
Wow.
Yeah, that implies an incredibly dense, highly detailed text containing an immense volume of information. It is not just a brief letter of condolence,
Yeah.
it is a massive compendium.
I'm struggling with the implications of that size, though.
How so?
Well, if it's 3 times the size of the Quran, doesn't that imply the Quran is missing 2/3 of its content? I mean, from a critical theological perspective, if I hear there's a divine book 3 times bigger than the Holy Scripture, my first thought is that the Scripture itself is incomplete.
And that reaction makes perfect sense. In fact, this is precisely the taboo accusation that polemicists and critics have hurled at Shia theology for centuries.
The accusation of tampering with the text?
Yes, it feeds into the accusation of tarif, which is the intentional distortion and alteration of the Quran. Critics argue that claiming the existence of a larger, secret divine book diminishes the absolute supremacy of the Quran.
But the Shia sources defend against this, right?
Very strongly. The Shia theological defense against this is ironclad in its own framework. Leading modern scholars, cited in our sources, such as Ayatollah Khoei and Alamet Tabatabai, emphatically state that there is not a single letter, not a single verse of the Quran contained within the Sahifa Fatimah.
Honestly, it's actually pretty simple when you think about it like a library.
A library.
Yeah. If I have a physics textbook that is 3 times thicker than a chemistry textbook, it doesn't mean the chemistry book is incomplete or missing 2/3 of its facts.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
It doesn't diminish the validity of the chemistry textbook at all. They just cover completely different subjects. They operate in different spheres of knowledge and have different purposes entirely.
That analogy perfectly captures how Shia epistemology categorizes these texts.
Right, they aren't competing.
Exactly. The Quran is the ultimate unalterable book of universal guidance, public law, and divine legislation. It is meant for all of humanity across all time to dictate how society should function and how humans should worship.
Well, the Sahifa is something else entirely.
Yes, the Sahifa Fatimah operates in a completely different ontological category. It is a book of private history, divine consolation, and specific genealogical prophecy.
So the size difference is completely irrelevant to the integrity of the Quranic text because they are not competing in the same arena.
Precisely. They serve entirely different theological functions.
Okay, so if this massive 230,000 word book doesn't contain Quranic verses and it doesn't contain Islamic laws, what exactly fills those pages?
It's a huge amount of text to fill.
It is. Let's conceptually open the vault and look at the table of contents based on what narrations from Imam Jafar al-Sadiq tell us.
The narrations in Al-Kafi provide a very specific inventory. First, as we established, there is the consultory knowledge.
The details about the afterlife.
Right. Detailed, esoteric descriptions of the prophet's heavenly abode, his proximity to the divine, and his intercessory power. This was the immediate balm meant directly for Fatima's heart.
To process the immediate grief.
Yes, but the vast majority of the text shifts from the present grief into the deep, unfolding future.
The sources say it contains the Mihan. I want to dig into that term.
Mihan is a very heavy concept.
These are the specific trials, tribulations, and sufferings that the progeny of Muhammad, specifically the line of the 12 Imams, will face throughout history.
The Mihan transforms the document from a simple letter of comfort into a profoundly heavy, almost tragic political almanac.
An almanac of suffering?
Exactly. It reportedly contains the names of every single king, ruler, or oppressor who will govern the earth until the day of judgment.
Wait, every single one?
Every single one. It outlines the exact nature of their rule, the oppression they will inflict, and the specific ways in which Fatima's descendants will be persecuted by them. It is a comprehensive historical roadmap of suffering and endurance.
It also contains Fatima's final will and testament, her wasiyah,
Yes, a very important inclusion.
detailing her estate, her final wishes regarding her burial, which historically was famously kept secret to prevent the ruling establishment from attending, and her spiritual legacy.
Right, the secret burial is a massive historical point of contention itself.
But what is just as important as what is in the book is what our sources explicitly say is not in it.
We have to draw that boundary clearly.
The texts emphatically declare there are no legal rulings. There is no halal and haram. It is not a book of Sharia or religious jurisprudence.
And this brings up a critical point about historical linguistics. We really need to clarify the terminology used in the classical sources.
You mean the word mushaf?
Exactly, specifically the word mushaf. Today, in the modern Islamic world, when someone says, "Pass me the mushaf," they almost exclusively mean a physical, bound copy of the Quran.
Right. The terms are basically interchangeable now.
The two words have become synonymous in everyday language. But in 7th century Arabic, mushaf simply meant a bound collection of pages enclosed between two covers, or a codex.
So it was just a physical descriptor.
Yes, it was a physical description of the object, not a theological title. It didn't acquire that exclusive Quranic connotation until decades later when the Quran was officially standardized and widely distributed in bound formats.
So calling it the Mushaf Fatimah back in 632 CE was essentially just saying Fatimah's bound book. It didn't mean Fatimah's Quran.
Exactly the distinction that modern scholars urge us to understand.
That makes a lot of sense.
And we also have to distinguish the Sahifa Fatimah from a whole library of other hidden or sacred books mentioned in Shia Hadith literature, because it is incredibly easy to conflate them.
Yeah, the sources list quite a few. Let's run through them.
For instance, the sources frequently mention al-Jafr. Now, this is described not as a book, but as a leather container.
Like a physical bag or box?
Basically, it holds previous divine scriptures, like the original unaltered Torah and Gospel, as well as the physical weapons of the Prophet Muhammad, serving as symbols of authority.
Okay, so that's al-Jafr. Then there's al-Jamia, which is a totally different text.
Very different.
The sources describe al-Jamia as a massive scroll, 70 cubits long, dictated by the Prophet to Ali. And unlike the Sahifa, al-Jamia actually does contain every single legal code.
Right, it's highly legislative.
It has every nuance of halal and haram, down to the compensation required for a minor scratch on the skin.
And just to round out the textual landscape, we must distinguish it from the Sahifa Sajjadiyah.
Ah, yes.
This is a very real, very public, and beautifully written collection of supplications and prayers authored by the 4th Shia Imam, Zayn al-Abidin.
You can go buy that one right now.
Exactly. That text is widely available. You can purchase it in almost any bookstore today.
Yeah.
The Sahifa Fatimah remains entirely distinct from all of these. It remains hidden, focused strictly on prophetic history and future trials.
The thing is, this raises a massive philosophical dilemma.
I think I know where you're going with this.
If this book lists every future ruler, every oppressor, and every specific trial, and the imams had access to it, why couldn't they just avoid their tragic fates?
Ah, the question of destiny.
Yeah. I mean, take the most devastating event in early Islamic history, the massacre at Karbala. If Imam Hussein had the Sahifa and it explicitly warned him about exactly what would happen on the plains of Karbala, who would betray him, and how he would be killed, why did he go?
It's a profound paradox.
If you possess an omniscient vantage point, a predetermined roadmap of history, why not use it to alter the timeline and save your family?
That is a phenomenal question, and it cuts straight to the core of Islamic philosophy regarding destiny, foreknowledge, and human agency.
How does the theology reconcile that?
How the Shia theological framework explains this is fascinating. They argue that foreknowledge does not negate divine destiny, nor does it remove moral responsibility and submission to God.
So knowing doesn't mean you're supposed to change it.
Exactly. The Imams are viewed as the ultimate exemplars of submitting entirely to the will of Allah. The Sahifa is not considered a tactical playbook or a cheat code to escape earthly trials.
So they read their own tragic ends in the text, and instead of running, they walk willingly into the fire because it is the divine plan.
In essence, yes. The possession of the knowledge is meant to prepare them spiritually, not to aid them in political evasion.
It's about spiritual fortitude, not tactical advantage.
Precisely. Rather than a tactical guide, the Sahifa is viewed within Shia theology as a credential of office.
A credential.
Yes, it is an esoteric inheritance that proves their divine appointment. It gives them the supernatural knowledge required to guide the community's spiritual trajectory, even if they must physically suffer the historical events ordained by God.
The possession of the book itself is the proof of the imamat.
Exactly. And according to the tradition, this document was passed meticulously from imam to imam, generation to generation.
And where is it now?
It currently resides with the 12th hidden imam, al-Mahdi, during his state of occultation.
So it's essentially locked away from the physical world right now.
Yes, kept in the unseen.
But holding on to a consoling private book is one thing. Claiming that an angel dictated a 230,000-word roadmap of history to someone who isn't a prophet forces a massive collision with mainstream Sunni doctrine.
Oh, absolutely. It's a huge point of contention.
This is the exact point where the Sahifa becomes a massive theological fault line.
It is the absolute breaking point. The debate over the Sahifa Fatimah exposes the deepest fissures between Sunni and Shia theological frameworks regarding the strict boundaries of revelation.
Let's get into the mechanics of that fault line, because the core Sunni objection to the Sahifa Fatimah is rooted in one of the most immovable fundamental doctrines of Islam.
The finality of prophethood.
Exactly. The Quran explicitly declares the Prophet Muhammad as Khatam al-Nabiyyin, the seal of the prophets.
There are no prophets after him.
For Sunni scholars, the narrative that the Archangel Gabriel comes down after the prophet's death, sits in a room, and dictates a massive book feels like a direct, blatant violation of this core tenet. It looks like a backdoor continuation of prophetic revelation.
This is precisely what triggers the theological alarm bells for Sunni jurists and scholars.
It blurs the line too much for them.
Exactly. From the Orthodox Sunni perspective, revelation, specifically YY, is inextricably linked to the office of prophethood. When Muhammad passed away, the divine channel of legislative, world-altering, angelic dictation was permanently, irrevocably closed.
So claiming Gabriel is still dictating books is a major issue.
Any claim to a new massive book dictated by Gabriel sounds dangerously close to claiming a new prophet has emerged, which unravels the finality of Islam itself.
But the Shia defense here is incredibly nuanced, and it hinges on the strict categorization of divine communication.
Yes, they are very careful with their definitions.
They do not claim Fatima was a prophet, not at all. They make a very sharp theological distinction between two different types of angelic interaction.
And those terms are critical here.
There is nubuwa, which is prophetic revelation. This is the heavy, world-changing communication that brings new religious laws, abrogates old laws, and creates scripture like the Torah, the Gospel, or the Quran.
The legislative revelations.
Right. And then there is a secondary category, wayatif, or ilham, which is angelic communication or divine inspiration that strictly does not bring new laws.
That distinction is the bedrock of the Shia defense. In their theology, Fatima is given the specific title muhadita.
Muhadita.
Yes, which literally translates to one who is spoken to by angels. It is viewed as a specific grace, a profound spiritual favor granted to a purified soul, but it is fundamentally different in kind and function from prophethood.
She is receiving information, not legislation.
Precisely.
And subhanAllah, when you look at the broader Islamic context, our sources point out that this isn't an entirely foreign concept invented out of thin air. The Quran itself provides explicit precedents for this.
It does, very clearly.
The Quran talks in detail about angels speaking to Maryam, Mary the mother of Jesus, giving her glad tidings. It talks about divine inspiration descending upon the mother of Moses to put her baby in the river.
And neither of those women were prophets.
Right. They were righteous women receiving crucial divine guidance.
The Shia argument leans heavily on these Quranic precedents. If Mary, who is not a prophet, could receive an angelic visitation to prepare her for her unique role, why not Fatima?
Especially considering her rank.
Exactly, especially when the Prophet Muhammad himself, in hadiths accepted by both Sunnis and Shias, referred to Fatima as the leader of the women of paradise, placing her spiritual rank alongside or above Maryam.
So the capacity for a righteous, purified human being to receive angelic communication is already an established Quranic reality.
Yes, the precedent is there in the text.
And it goes even further than the Quranic examples. The sources point out that even in the most authentic Sunni hadith collections, like Sahih Bukhari, there are narrations referring to the second caliph, Umar ibn al-Khattab, as a muhadath.
Right, someone who receives angelic intuition or divine inspiration.
So the idea of non-prophets receiving divine signals exists on both sides of the sectarian aisle.
The concept of a muhadath is indeed acknowledged in Sunni traditions, but the divergence between the two camps is about the scale, the form, and the tangibility of that communication.
I never thought about it that way. It's like the difference between a head of state issuing a new public law that completely restructures the government versus that same head of state receiving a private, consoling security briefing.
That's a great analogy.
The channel of communication is open in both scenarios, but the purpose, the authority, and the societal impact of the message are totally different.
A brilliant way to frame the mechanics of why versus ilham. But we have to look at how classical Sunni scholars responded to this defense.
They weren't buying it, were they?
No. For intellectual heavyweights like Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn Kathir, that analogy completely falls apart when applied to the specific claims of the Sahifa Fatimah. They categorically, unequivocally reject its existence and its theological validity.
Why, though? If they accept the concept of divine intuition for Umar or the angelic visitation for Mary in the Quran, why draw such a hard line at Fatimah's book?
Because of the material specifics of the claim. To Sunni scholars like Ibn Taymiyyah, the idea of a fleeting angelic whisper, a sudden intuition of the heart, or a brief verbal reassurance is one thing.
That's acceptable within their framework.
Right. But a systematic 230,000-word physical book explicitly dictated by the Archangel Gabriel over months, containing the precise names of all future rulers until the end of time, to them, that massively crosses the line into gulu.
Gulu, theological extremism.
Yes, gulu translates to theological extremism or exaggeration. Ibn Taymiyyah was a strict literalist who defended the normative boundaries of established sunnah.
So he viewed it as a political invention.
He argued that these esoteric narratives were entirely fabricated by later Shia partisans, specifically to invent a divine, unchallengeable mandate for the imitate.
And this brings us directly into the grueling arena of the hadith sciences. Because from the Sunni perspective, theology must be backed by verifiable transmission.
The chains of narration are everything.
Right, and the Sahifa Fatimah is completely, utterly absent from the Kutub al-Sitta. Those are the 6 canonical Sunni hadith collections, compiled by scholars like Bukhari and Muslim.
Sunni hadith authentication relies entirely on continuous, verifiable chains of transmission, known as the isnad.
And those chains need to be public.
These chains must trace back through the broader community of the Prophet's companions to be considered authentic. The Sunni argument is heavily empirical.
Show me the proof, basically.
If a document this massive, this physically distinct, and this politically important actually existed in the household of Ali and Fatima, major companions like Abu Bakr, Umar, or even Fatima's own sons, Hassan and Hussein, would have publicly referenced it in their sermons or legal rulings.
But they don't.
Its total absence from the vast corpus of Sunni historical and biographical records is, to Sunni hadith scholars, definitive proof of its later fabrication.
I'm struggling with the timeline here based on what these sources say. If this book was written in 632 CE, during the immediate aftermath of the Prophet's death, why am I only seeing it heavily quoted and systematically categorized in sources from over a century later?
Now we are stepping into the secular academic viewpoint.
Was it just sitting silently in a vault during the entirety of the Umayyad dynasty?
You have just hit on the exact anomaly that secular academics zero in on. When Western historians, trained in textual criticism, look at the evidence, they notice a glaring chronological gap.
The 130-year gap?
Yes.
Let's dive into that. Who are the primary figures bringing this text to light?
The most systematic, detailed, and voluminous references to the physical Sahifa Fatimah don't emerge in the surviving literature immediately after her death in the early 7th century.
They show up much later.
They emerged robustly around the mid-8th century, primarily during the era of the 5th and 6th Shia Imams Muhammad al-Baqir and his son, Imam Jafar al-Sadiq.
So that places the flourishing of this narrative roughly 130 to 150 years after the passing of Fatima.
Correct.
So secular academics like Patricia Crone and Wilfred Madelung mentioned in our sources look at that timeline, look at the political environment of the 8th century, and formulate what we can call the political construction theory.
It's a very pragmatic lens.
They ask a very cynical but historically grounded question. Was this narrative retroactively constructed to serve a political need?
If we contextualize this within the massive upheaval of 8th century Islamic history, the secular theory makes compelling sociological sense.
What was going on in the 8th century?
The mid-8th century was a time of intense, violent political turmoil. The Abbasid revolution had just successfully overthrown the Umayyad Caliphate.
A massive power shift.
Huge. And during this revolution, the Abbasids heavily utilized the rhetoric of returning power to the family of the Prophet. But once they secured the throne, they aggressively turned on their cousins, the Alid descendants, the line of Ali and Fatima.
So the people who helped them get into power became the new targets.
Exactly. The Imams, like al-Sadiq, found themselves politically marginalized, stripped of temporal power, and subjected to intense surveillance and persecution by the new Abbasid caliphs.
The Imams didn't have standing armies. They didn't have control of the state treasury or the physical infrastructure of the empire.
They had no hard political power.
They were operating under the crushing weight of a state apparatus that viewed them as a perpetual threat to its legitimacy.
Precisely. So, from the perspective of a secular historian, how does a marginalized religious figure maintain authority over a massive following without any temporal power?
You have to find power somewhere else.
You pivot to esoteric authority, a secret, Divinely inspired book possessed exclusively by the imams served as the ultimate unchallengeable proof of their superiority.
It's the ultimate trump card.
It provided a powerful counter-narrative to the caliphate. The Abbasid caliphs had swords, goals, and territory, but the imams had the Sahifa.
They had the blueprint of history.
They had exclusive, inherited access to the true inner mechanics of divine history. It explained their superior knowledge, justified their spiritual leadership, and gave their followers a reason to remain loyal even while they were being politically crushed.
But wait, how can a document functionally exist as a tool of authority if no one in the public has ever read it?
It's a paradox, isn't it?
How does it build loyalty if no one can quote a single direct sentence from it? I mean, even the massive encyclopedias of Shia Hadith, like Bihar al-Anwar, don't say, here's chapter 1 of the Sahifa, let's read it.
No, they don't.
They just talk about the book. They talk about what the Imam says is in the book. It's completely unfalsifiable.
And that observation is the absolute crux of the empirical critique. Our sources bring up Karl Popper's criterion of falsifiability, which is a major hurdle when analyzing the Sahifa from a scientific or strict historical standpoint.
Right, Popper story.
Popper argued that for a theory to be considered scientifically valid, it must be able to be tested and conceivably proven false.
But you can't test a hidden book.
Exactly. A physical book that is hidden with a concealed, occulted imam, which cannot be seen, carbon-dated, read, or tested by any independent scholar, is completely unfalsifiable.
You can't prove it's real, but you can't prove it's not real either.
You cannot empirically prove it exists, and because you can't search everywhere in the unseen, you cannot prove it doesn't exist.
It's a closed epistemological loop. It requires you to accept the premise before you can accept the evidence.
It is. But religiously and sociologically, this dynamic is not unique. It fits a very well-known and powerful pattern.
Really? Like, where else do we see this?
The concept of hidden books, or esoteric knowledge, validates spiritual authority across many major global traditions. Think of the Gospel of Judas in early Gnostic Christianity, which offered secret teachings.
Oh, right.
Think of the esoteric texts in Jewish Kabbalah. Or consider a more modern example, the sealed golden plates of Mormonism.
That is a fascinating parallel. Joseph Smith claimed to translate the golden plates, but then the plates were purportedly taken back to heaven by an angel. So no secular historian can examine them today. They are empirically unfalsifiable. But the absolute belief in their historical existence is the foundational bedrock of an entire, thriving global faith.
A perfect parallel. For the believer, the proof isn't empirical. They aren't waiting for a team of archaeologists to dig up a physical manuscript and subject it to carbon dating.
I don't need the science.
No. The proof operates on an entirely different epistemology, the epistemology of trust.
Epistemology of trust. Tell me more about that.
Let's look at how modern people trust the existence of quantum mechanics. Most of us cannot see a quark, nor can we do the complex mathematics to prove they exist.
I definitely can't do the math.
Right, but we trust the chain of physicists and mathematicians who interpret the data. In Shia theology, the believer trusts the continuous chain of transmission, the isnad, coming from the infallible imams.
So, if Imam al-Sadiq, who is universally recognized across all Islamic sects for his profound truthfulness, his piety, and his immense scholarship, sits before his followers and says, I possess the Sahifa of my grandmother Fatimah, the believer accepts it entirely.
Yes, without hesitation.
It is a matter of profound theological faith in the character of the Imam, not a demand for archaeological evidence.
Exactly the mechanism. It is a completely different way of knowing what is true.
It shifts the burden of proof from the object to the person holding it.
Yes, and beyond the intense political theories, the complex hadith sciences, and the philosophical debates over empirical proof, there is a deeply human, socially groundbreaking element to this story that often gets completely overlooked in the heat of sectarian polemics.
What's getting overlooked?
The actual role of Fatima herself within the narrative.
Here's where it gets really interesting for you listening, because when we step back from the heated Sunni-Shia debates and just look at the structure of the narrative itself, we see something incredibly rare in late antiquity.
Very rare.
We see a woman placed at the absolute, undisputed center of divine communication.
It is a remarkable narrative subversion of the typical patriarchal structures of religious texts.
How do modern scholars view that subversion?
Our sources highlight the work of modern Islamic feminists, scholars like Fatima Mernissi and Amina Wadud, who have looked at this specific tradition and noted its profound radical implications for gender and spiritual authority.
Think about the phrasing. The book isn't called the Book of Ali. even though he is the one who physically held the pen and wrote it down.
Right.
It is the Sahifa Fatimah. She is the primary agent in the room. She is the one with the spiritual capacity to receive the cosmic knowledge from the archangel.
She is the active receiver.
Ali, the great warrior of Islam, the renowned scholar, the future caliph, is sitting there acting in a subordinate role as her scribe. He is recording her revelation, her consolation.
That specific dynamic places female spiritual authority on a level that is almost unparalleled in classical religious history.
It's incredibly empowering within that context.
In this narrative, Fatima is not a passive vessel, nor is she merely a background character mourning a great man. She is the active, chosen conduit of divine truth. The knowledge that will guide the infallible imams for centuries flows explicitly through her.
And what makes it so resonant is that it grounds these massive supernatural claims in a profoundly human reality, the psychology of grief.
Yes, the human element is so strong here.
Both Sunni and Shia historical sources, despite all their disagreements, agree on the raw, undeniable facts of her life at that exact moment. She was a young woman who had just lost her father, her protector, and her spiritual guide.
The grief was all-consuming.
She was politically sidelined, economically disenfranchised, and she died shortly after in immense, crushing sorrow.
Anthropologically and sociologically, we see this pattern throughout human history.
The pattern of divine intervention during grief.
Exactly. When communities or deeply significant individuals suffer profound trauma and sudden loss of a stabilizing figure, they often experience or construct narratives of continued divine communication.
It's a coping mechanism for the community.
It is a fundamental human way to process unimaginable grief. It is a mechanism for spiritual survival.
Alhamdulillah. Whether you view the Sahifa as a literal, physical scroll dictated word for word by an angel, or if you view it as a symbolic theological narrative born out of a community's trauma, it reflects the people desperately trying to hold on to the divine connection they felt had just been severed by the prophet's death.
That brings us to the sociological truth of the matter. Dr. Ali Shariati, a highly influential 20th century Iranian intellectual mentioned in our sources, argued exactly this point.
Oh, it was his perspective.
He suggested that the ultimate truth of the Sahifa Fatimah isn't necessarily about a physical piece of parchment hidden in a cave or an unseen dimension somewhere.
So it's symbolic. It represents something larger than a physical book.
Yes. For Shariati, the Sahifa is a symbolic representation of Fatimah's immense spiritual resilience.
I see.
It represents her enduring authority, her profound resistance against political oppression, and the preservation of a marginalized truth.
So the book itself is the legacy.
The book is the enduring legacy of her defiance. It symbolizes an unbroken connection to the divine, a connection that remained pure and legitimate, regardless of who actually sat on the caliph's throne in Damascus or Baghdad.
Wow. Okay, let's try to synthesize this incredible journey through these texts. The Sahifa Fatimah acts as a massive historical prism.
It reflects whatever angle you look at it from.
Exactly. If you look at it from the Shia perspective, it is a beautiful, deeply moving testament to divine consolation. It is the esoteric proof of the Imam's special knowledge and the guarantee of an unbroken chain of spiritual guidance through the darkest periods of history.
And if you rotate that prism and look at it from the Sunni perspective, it serves as a stark cautionary tale.
A warning about boundaries.
Yes, it represents the grave dangers of theological exaggeration, the strict, uncompromising necessity of rigorous hadith authentication, and the fierce defense of the finality of the Prophet Muhammad's legislative message.
And if you look at it from the secular academic perspective, it is a fascinating, complex case study in how religious communities facing persecution construct authority, process deep historical trauma, and build unshakable identity through sacred, esoteric narratives.
It is all of those things simultaneously. The text, or the idea of the text, holds all of those realities at once.
So as we wrap up this exploration of our sources, we want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over.
Something to think about.
We live in an age that is utterly obsessed with data. We demand empirical proof, transparency, open source code, and verifiable facts for absolutely everything. If we can't see it, touch it, or measure it, we tend not to believe it.
We are entirely tethered to the tangible empirical world.
But the story of the Sahifa Fatimah asks us to step back and consider the immense world-shaping power of the unseen.
The power of belief.
Think about it. Here's a text that no ordinary person has ever publicly read, a book that has never been printed by a publisher, never been physically verified by a historian's radiocarbon dating.
Unseen and untested.
Yet, the mere belief in its existence has shaped the theology, the political resistance, and the historical trajectory of millions of people over 14 centuries.
It has built theological empires. It has sustained oppressed communities through unimaginable hardships, giving them the resilience to survive empires that possessed all the tangible power in the world.
Exactly. So it begs the profound question for our modern, data-driven world. How much of our own reality today is shaped not by the information we can actually see, touch, and read, but by the profound faith we place in the knowledge we are told is kept safely out of sight?
That's a very heavy thought.
Maybe the most powerful books in human history aren't the ones sitting openly on our shelves. Maybe they're the ones we're still waiting to be opened.
A truly powerful thought to end our discussion on.
Thank you so much for joining us for this extensive analysis of the source material. Keep questioning the narratives, keep reading deeply, and keep exploring the immense power of the unseen. We'll catch you next time.